I don't know a lot about it now, Clay, and I'm obviously going to embarrass myself just by bringing it up in the first place, but I do find mysteries like Roanoke Island to be kind of captivating and interesting. They're one of those they're those stories that when they do eventually, if they ever do figure out the truth, it's going to be a huge letdown, that it's not nearly as mysterious as what actually, you can kind of think about what happened. But Roanoke Island, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just a colony in Americas back when America was being colonized that just kind of disappeared one year. Like people dropped them off. They came back the next year to settle with more settlers or something, and then the whole town was deserted. That's my understanding of it. And they're kind of unsure what happened to this day, although it seems like either starvation or Indian attack or something like that took care of everybody. But I don't know if you have any Roanoke info to fill in or anything like that, but that's the best I can do to lead into this episode, is to talk about the actual thing that inspired it.
Yeah, those things, I've always been fascinated by those. I love them. As much as science and fact is like great, it's always a letdown. You're right. Like I don't want to know what happened to that group. I don't want to find out that they ran out of food and they died.
Yeah.
Because the most captivating thing about it is not only did they come back and there was nobody there was a word carved into a tree, I think, that just said Croatoa or Croatoan or something like that. And that's really interesting and creepy as hell.
Right.
And I know the other possible solution is that they actually meshed with the Indian tribe, which I may have actually been called the Croatoans. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But that became part of the urban legend, where it was like years later, some Indians from the Native Americans from that surrounding tribe were seen to have like blonde hair and blue eyes or something like that. So, which that stuff's really interesting. I find that's why I love the Loch Ness Monster, because they're never going to solve it, and when they do, it's so underwhelming that you're like, no, that's not it. Can't be that. Can't be just a really amorous eel or something.
Yeah, or just a submarine with a plaster face put on top of it that someone's driving it around. Yeah. It's I guess letdown is a good way to. I guess learning about the truth being a letdown is a good way to kind of make this analogous to this episode, because once we figure out the truth, it is kind of a bit of a letdown. But let's take a break.
It makes. Sorry, I was just going to say, like, as great as it is to know the facts about stuff like that, I do think it makes the world feel smaller.
Yeah,
because it makes things feel really finite and really real, and taking away all of the fun and mystery to stuff like that just makes you realize that this is pretty much it.
That's kind of the basis of conspiracy theory, though, isn't it? That it's like the truth is too boring, therefore something more exciting must have happened. Yeah.
And now that we've started this on a downer, let's move into the actual episode, I guess.
That's right. Which is all up. We're going to talk about Terra Nova. We'll take a break, play a quote from the episode, and then we will be back to break it down.
What makes you think we're here to hurt you?
Humans hurt Novans.
Why do you think that?
They gutted us. Our families. Our before families.
I don't understand.
Poison rain. I was no taller than a digger, but I can still see back. We lived on the overside, then the humans dropped the poison, burned our skin, gutted the grown ones. There was no place to go but here.
Okay, so Terra Nova is the 6th episode of the first season, aired on October 24th, 2001. Teleplay goes to Antoinette Stella. Story credit goes to Rick Berman and Brannon Braga, directed by LeVar Burton. Unknown date in universe. In this episode, Enterprise investigates the mystery of a lost Earth colony whose inhabitants disappeared decades before, but that doesn't mean that they left. So this is the Terra Nova, where Archer and crew go out to find the long-lost colony of Terra Nova, and then they solve a mystery and pull a guy out from underneath the tree. the very end of it. This isn't a really good episode. This is, I don't know if this is just an example of a script where they had a cool idea and had no idea how to wrap it up halfway through.
It really feels like that, yeah.
It really completely falls apart, and it's also one of those bad episodes where it's so bad that I start really going critical on the setup of everything, where I'm like, where I spend this going, is 70 years really enough time for this to all have happened?
That was the same thing I was thinking. I was like doing the math in my head, and it was like, imagine that old lady is Bernie Sanders or something. Like, is 70 years is enough time for Bernie Sanders to talk about like the 40s as though it was 5,000 years ago?
Well, also he'll stop. He won't know the word for like the ground or caves. He'll call like sun like burning orb and things like that.
Yeah, it feels like. So the setup to this seems like it's a cool setup. The Roanoke analogy thing is cool, but it feels like something they've done 100 times before on Star Trek, where it's like, oh, we found this colony and it actually turns out to be people, and but it's a first contact technically because they've been here, so like one of those things. But the thing that really makes it fall apart is they end up doing so much backflipping to make the like Lord of the Flies type people work in the time span that they've given, that it just gets really kind of weird and convoluted, because the way that they were talking about stuff, the way that the Novans, I guess is what they're called, right?
Yep.
Novans. Yep. The way that they were talking about humans, I was like, oh, these must be the natives to this planet. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Indians in the Roanoke analogy.
Right, yeah. And then Archer was like, no, you guys are human. You're like us. And I'm like, what? But it's like 70 years. So this,
and it's
asteroid,
only one. It's basically the elder generation has not died out yet. So it's not like you've gone through multiple generations where they've forgotten where they came from. The people who are the elders of the society were children when the spaceship landed in the first place.
Right. And like there were apparently enough children that they could procreate twice over.
And enough extremely competent 4-year-olds that were running around where they somehow managed to build a society.
That's the other thing, is like, in order for this to work, they have to backflip into, oh, an asteroid hit the planet and killed all the adults. But it's like, so then this, it was like 70 years ago, and the colony has been there for 70 years?
Yes. Or
it's been 70 years since they heard from people. I can't remember.
No, it's been there 70 years, I think.
So this, if that's what it is,
because the girl is 70. So the main character female of the Novans was a child when this happened, and she looks about 70. So
sure, okay. So the asteroid hit the planet 70 years ago. So that means that the colony was only there for like 6 months.
Yes, they said there was extremely bad timing in the episode. They just showed up and immediately got hit by a comet. Yeah.
And so it's like, it's weird that they were there long enough to build a society and also get pissed off at humans back on Earth.
Yes.
And then they all got wiped out by an asteroid. And the children who were there, which apparently there was a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Unless those 58 people are all inbreds, that they managed to survive. And also, it's like, I feel like they end up making it the kid thing because they have to explain how they could forget so much Earth stuff so quickly. It's like, oh, well, if they're kids, they never learn the Earth stuff, so blah, 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 blah.
Which is shocking. I mean, you're battling two things here. The children are so young that they do not basically understand anything about language in terms of English, where they overhear their parents saying these goddamn humans, and they don't associate humans with themselves. So they're that young that this is the problem.
Which shouldn't make which doesn't super make sense, because the Nadette, in a reveal worthy of Zardoz to actually be named Bernadette, she is old enough in that picture that Archer shows her that she looks like she's, I don't know, like 8.
Yeah, I would have thought 7 or 8 in that picture.
So she's old enough to understand stuff to an extent.
Yep.
And so like it does make it that much more interesting and kind of backflippy and convoluted that she, being the elder of this group, is like, yeah, I don't know what humans are, but clearly they're bad.
Right.
You know,
I overheard my
I
parents
guess,
talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess her home life was just made up of her father just ranting about the government back on Earth.
Yeah, I mean, they're young enough to not be able to understand that fundamental concept that they are human and that their parents are talking about people that are like them. But they're also sophisticated enough to survive as a colony. Like they created a society somehow without knowing anything else or any kind of language skills or anything like that. It's just so, the setup is just so broken. And it's one of those things, like if the idea was really cool or if what they were doing was playing around, you'd kind of be like, whatever. That's like, it's kind of a strange setup, but the idea is fun. But they really don't do anything with it whatsoever. And it just turns into, it's an episode that gives you about 3 or 4 head fakes about, oh, this is what the episode's going to be. And then it doesn't do any of them. And it just goes into a action finale, like a really half-assed action finale.
It does really feel like once they got into that, when they land the shuttlecraft falls into the earth and collapses, and then a tree falls on a guy. It really did feel like they got to the point in the script where they had exhausted all their ideas for the concept, and they were like, we still got like 5 to 6 minutes left. We got to do something.
Yeah, and even when the guy's stuck under the tree, the way that they have them talk is funny. He says something like, "The tree has sealed me down."
Yeah. Broken my leg has become.
It is, it's an episode that I do enjoy the setup. I'm honestly shocked.
Hate it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just said I didn't hate it. It was
the entire episode or just the setup.
No, the whole thing. Like it gets kind of silly at the end, but like I didn't think this was like one of the worst Star Trek episodes I've ever seen.
No, I don't think so.
No.
It's like it's more of a letdown than anything.
Sure,
like I'm honestly, I think the biggest problem is that honestly I'm surprised that they didn't have anywhere to go with it. Like they bring up this thing about there's this possible plot line about whether or not it's appropriate for Archer to forcibly bring them back, right? Like,
which is my favorite part of the episode for 2 reasons, and I'll let you know what those are when you're done.
So T'Pol and Archer are talking to each other, and Archer there, what you think he's going to, because Archer there kind of shows the problems that he's shown as a character, not problems, but his bad characteristics as a person are, he's kind of naive about what he's doing. So he's trying to figure out this like issue that they've never had to deal with before. He comes across as a little bit of like a fascist in some ways. Like he's talking about sort of forcibly taking them. They have a right to do this. Like this is destiny. This is what needs to happen. And T'Pol kind of pushes back against him, and they abandon that. And then you think that they're going to do something about like learning to trust each other, which is not really what it's about either at the end. And then it just turns into the tree thing. But it's a head faker of an episode because you think that there's so much they can do with it that they really don't choose to do anything with it, surprisingly.
Yeah. The reason I like that scene, excuse me, is from the Archer standpoint, I really like the way that they set him up in this episode as I forget exactly what the scene is, but he has that line where he says, "If I can't make first contact with other humans, then what are we doing out here?" Essentially,
yep.
Right? Like this should be a slam dunk to be able to go down, see what's going on, and then do the job that he's going to have to do, talking to Klingons and Vulcans. Et cetera,
this is
et cetera.
The easiest version of his job, and if he can't do it, what good is he?
Right. And that scene with T'Pol, I like because he is he's reacting in a very human sort of way to the situation, where I think that scene is flawed structurally in terms of like the things that are at play, but I do like the angle they have him coming at it from as being sort of like, well, why can't we just take them out of there? What I wish they had done is I wish they had made Archer, again, I think the biggest problem with the show so far, for me anyway, is that they have all these teachable moments for Archer, and he never learns anything from them.
Right.
So like in this situation, I wish it had been Archer saying, "Gee, these guys are descended from humans, but they're really not humans. They're not human. I mean, they're not from Earth, they're not Earthlings anymore. This is their planet. I can't just take them out of here. That wouldn't be the right thing to do. I don't know what the answer is. And then he comes to this conclusion, which is like a really easy conclusion that should have been at the top of the list, is just, move 100 miles to the south, you fucking morons. But like that, this group of natives don't even think to do that. That's what's that's how humans on Earth existed for like 2,000 years until they invented.
You just leave the area that's bad and you try to move somewhere good. Yeah,
exactly. As soon as it got cold, everybody moved to the south for 6 months. Like
it's only been 70 years, Clay. They can't make that much distance.
Apparently, I'm sorry. They couldn't. They could evolve. They could evolve their entire way of being, but not that. And I wish they had him go through that thought process where it's like he's learning about what first contact means in this situation and what is the best way to go about it. The other reason that's my favorite scene is because T'Pol continues to be my favorite character on the show so far, because when he's like, how do we get them out of there? And her first answer is throw stun grenades at them. She's such a bitch. It's hilarious. She's just like being such an asshole to him in such a perfect Vulcan way, where she's like, well, if this is the road you want to go down, I'll tell you how you could do it.
Yeah.
We throw stun grenades at them and forcibly remove them from the caves. And he's like, no, we can't do that. And she uses that as like a backhanded way of being like, well, we can't. Yeah, there's a reason we can't do that. And it's not the stun grenades. It's this stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought that scene was great. It's again, it's not like, is it capital G good? Probably not, but I really enjoyed it.
I mean, if I'm understanding canon right at this point, they don't have the Prime Directive, right? So they can't call what they're talking about the Prime Directive at this point because they haven't formalized that concept. What I think the episode doesn't do is that
I'm happy there wasn't a scene where he was like conflicted about what to do, and he's like, I wish there was some sort of
initial rule,
prime directive of some
prime
sort.
Direction. The episode to me is, it should be an examination of whether or not the idea that will become the Prime Directive applies in this case.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
they've done that before in Star Trek. They've talked about whether or not the Prime Directive applies to humans in TNG episodes, and they kind of waffle on it. But I think that this episode, the setup here is better than any of the stuff that they did in TNG, because TNG, when they went down to meet those planets, the humans were basically just normal humans who were unaware of what the situation was. Yeah. So they were able to handle it. But here, as T'Pol says, it's more about destroying their culture, which is the problem with what they're trying to do by rescuing them. And I think that if you want to do this as Archer learns a lesson, this episode should kind of be a downer where Archer rescues these people, right? They do the stun grenade thing and they beam them all up. And as they're bringing them back to Earth, the final scene is just them, Archer kind of going in and talking to them, be like, oh, it's going to be great. You'll be able to go home and everything like that. And them all being crestfallen that they've been taken away from where they have lived their entire lives. And I think that is the downerness of what Archer does there, where Archer can reflect on he made the wrong decision here and that things are more complicated than what he thinks are going to be going on, is the only way the episode can go, instead of trust me to shoot this tree off this guy and then we will get out of here and I will leave you behind and we'll all be happy.
Yeah, I don't think they should have gone that far with it, just because the idea of bringing them all back onto the ship and then flying them back to Earth is a lot of backtracking as far as like what they're doing in the concept of the show. Like the idea, it's, if I was T'Pol, I'd be like, you're gonna fit 58 people. There's no room for these people. We got to fly like 6 months to get back to Earth.
Yeah,
what are you gonna do with these people on the ship that whole time? Like that should have been part of her argument. But I do like what you're saying, where like he tries to do what he thinks is the right thing, and it turns out being not the right thing for the people he's doing it for.
Yeah. It's just another, because I do like the idea of Archer continually learning lessons, at least in this first season, about what the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, and why sometimes what he thinks the right thing to do is actually the wrong thing to do in its place. And they do it again in this episode. That it's really like the fact that he doesn't learn anything, like we don't get the sense that he learns anything really.
I find very frustrating. And they do it again in this episode where they have that final scene where they're all eating dinner, and it's sort of like dun 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 kind of episode ending where they kind of chuckle about having Travis write the report.
Yeah.
And they don't even talk about what just happened.
Yeah.
Or like
they solve the mystery.
Implications.
Yeah. The humanity is lost in the fact that they put a period on the end of the story of Terra Nova.
Yeah, it's like they finish what happens there, and then Archer just goes into his room and like he does that miming of shooting a basketball and having it go in because he's so happy that he just like slam dunked that.
Yeah.
But it's I wish there was a little bit more reflection as to what just happened in these episodes, because they did that so well in Deep Space Nine and TNG, and they have yet to really do it here.
Yeah, it's surprising. Based on almost exclusively on the fact that Archer seems to be making questionable decisions a lot of the time. You think they would kind of bring that up. The other thing that beyond the 70-year-old, like how is 70 years enough time for all of this to fallen down, to have gone down? The other thing that the badness of the episode makes me think about is they keep referring to Terra Nova as like the great mystery of their time. Like it's up there with like Amelia Earhart and things like that. Mm-hmm. The mystery is just no one's picking up the telephone. Like they never made it to this planet to find out that all the people were missing. They don't know anything. The mystery might just be the fact that like their communications broke down,
Yeah. The best part of that whole thing is when they're like, yeah, and no one ever found out what happened to them. And I think it's T'Pol is like, why didn't you just send another ship? And they're like,
the Vulcans. Why didn't you ask the Vulcans to go?
Yeah. And they're like, why didn't the Earthlings send another ship? And Archer's like, it's a long trip.
Well, that's the other thing that you think the episode is almost maybe going to be about, because when they reveal that they got there and the comet wiped them out or whatever, Trip has this really sort of profound line. He's like, 9 years of travel, all to be wiped out in a blink. What was it even for? And you're like, oh, is that what the episode is about? And it's not about that whatsoever. But
they also do this bit where the Novans are they're talking about humans as though the appearance of humans is what caused them to die or something.
Yes.
And I found that very confusing. And they try to backflip that by explaining it with the recording of the parents, I guess. But it's like these Novans have not seen humans. I don't know where they would get the idea or why the original Novans would jump to the conclusion that humans caused them to be killed. Like that's why I thought that they were natives,
right?
And there was some sort of clash between the natives and the humans, because that hostility towards humans, it seemed kind of out of nowhere, and I don't think the recording really does enough to explain it.
No, I think you're just supposed to assume that the language they were using was that their parents were like these humans. For some reason they're calling them humans. They're like, these humans are going to come and just destroy. Is that why they call it? Is that why they keep saying get gutted? Because are the parents basically using language like they're going to gut the colony and things like that? Like,
I guess.
Yeah.
Like I kept trying to wrap my mind around what the evolution of this new quote unquote species would be, and it's like, imagine if you founded a new race of people and set up your essentially your like religious system, for lack of a better explanation, over a phone call that your dad made where he was yelling about his work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's difficult to really kind of like like you as an 8-year-old found a tape of your dad yelling about his boss at work. Yeah. And you're like, this is the method by which we were destroyed.
It's almost more like your father was arguing with the insurance company about a copay that they're not paying or something. Like, and you just built your entire. It's like,
behold the awful premium.
The humans are trying to bleed me dry every day. They're just bleed me dry. I pay weekly.
He seems to be dying. He has the premium.
Please,
the premium is the premium is that's what it's, the deductible. Yeah. He has the deductible. The deductible is killing him.
It is really. It is really, really a terribly flawed idea, and it's just so sad. I mean, I don't really have much else to say about this one. I like the setup. I like kind of the whole way that it goes through. I think it's a terrible ending, and I think that just the idea that 70 years have passed and these people are fundamentally different than what they were is just a very strange thing. Although the show continues in a positive sense to be very creepy. Where when they find the Novans in the cave, it's a very effective, creepy scene.
Yeah, that stuff was pretty good. Like I didn't hate this overall. I think the first half is definitely. I think it's good-ish up until they really start talking to the Novans, and then once all that stuff starts coming out, it starts falling apart for me.
Yeah.
I think they're like. The Novans themselves are like one more pass away design-wise from looking cool.
Yeah,
like I liked the paint stuff on their face. I bet the concept sketch for this thing looked amazing. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't tell if their faces are scales or if it was supposed to be mud.
Yeah, I think it's mud. But I think the Enterprise crew themselves think that they look reptilian. I think
yeah. And the armor thing was kind of cool, but they still look like, Star Trek planet people, where they have an odd sense of, an odd but strangely complete sense of how clothing works.
Yep.
Like they managed to figure out sewing and stuff over the last 70 years, which I mean, good for them. And the apparently they only eat armadillos, which is
yes. Diggers. Another, I like the puppetry scene of when Archer sees the thing digging through the ground or whatever. Yeah, that's
yes, yeah.
I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about this one. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Not really. It's one of those. I think what's interesting about this is it runs into that problem that I feel like we've talked about multiple times on more TNG than Deep Space Nine, because they didn't go to a lot of new planets in Deep Space Nine. But the planets always are, the problem is always localized to a single community, and they never address the fact that there is an entire world that this community is in. Mm-hmm. So it's in this episode they actually do that. And they use it as the solution to the problem. So it's like, oh, well, this is a giant world. This radiation isn't everywhere. If we just move them to the Florida Keys, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it's weird how opening up your sphere of your environment like that does bring in certain questions that maybe don't apply to these small, when they handle these things more locally, such as, are there other natives on this planet?
Right.
Are there animals on this planet other than armadillos? If they move them to the Florida Keys, are they going to be eaten by the native gigantic human-eating birds that live there?
Right.
I mean, these aren't really like important questions, but it's one of those things where it's like you've got this small localized story that your solution involves bringing it into the larger world that it inhabits, and they don't really even casually even address any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I like my solution for that. I think if you take them off the planet, I think that fixes everything like that. You'd probably have to deal with how are they going to get them home in a reasonable amount of time, or why is the Enterprise going back to Earth so quickly? But I don't know. You say you drop them, and they do drop them off.
Usually when they do stuff like this, it's usually like either or. It's either they stay and they get destroyed because the world is going to blow up or something, or they leave. And whatever. And It's always like, oh, we don't want to leave. Well, you're going to be destroyed. Well, we don't want to leave though. But this one, it's like, no, if we just move 2 states over, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
So it's a weird, it is a strangely cliche, or I should say familiar Star Trek episode, but the specifics of it are just kind of weird and convoluted and don't really mesh, I think, the way that they could.
Yeah. Yeah. They took a stock story and kind of ended it badly but uniquely in some ways. You can't say that Star Trek has ever done this before, the way they say move down the block a little bit. It's just narratively unsatisfying because it's so... The resolution of the Novan conflict doesn't really amount to anything other than solving the problem for them of how they're going to stay alive. Like the solution, the fact that it falls off of whether or not it's good to take them back so quickly, back to Earth or take them home or whatever, is a very strange step where the script doesn't want to deal with that for some reason. Like they have a scene with Archer and T'Pol talking about it. You don't even really have a scene where Archer says, never mind, I'm going to go back on what I thought earlier. He just kind of adopts a new line of thinking. And
it's in the same scene. Yeah. It's he goes from, this is what I'm going to do. And T'Pol's like, sure, we can do that. If you want to be it's going to be kind of suck for everybody. You can do it. And then he's like, yeah, you're right. Maybe we should do this instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's a little bit of a letdown. Let's take a break.
Yeah.
We'll play a quote from the episode. We'll come back. We'll read some patron thoughts and give our final thoughts about Terra Nova.
Ever heard of Judge Crater?
Crater?
Disappeared in the early 20th century. How about Amelia Earhart?
No.
1937. Never found a trace of her. A lot of people spent years, decades trying to figure out what happened to them. But neither of those mysteries holds a candle to Terra Nova. And we solved it.
Did more than that. Those people were a year or two away from extinction. We didn't just find them. We saved their lives.
All these years, wondering about that colony. I never thought I'd become a part of their history.
If you enjoyed the content today, you can support the show at patreon.com/thepenskyfile. It's the best way to do that. A couple dollars a month gets you extra stuff. This month, we're going to be talking about Brightburn, Clay. That won the poll.
Ooh.
So the movie Brightburn, where evil has a superhero from 2019. So if you're interested in our coverage of that, you can sign up at patreon.com/thepenskyfile. And as always, our Captain Tier supporters get a special shout out. Special thanks go to Andrew Cherlog, Ben Douglas, Cardinal Doomsday, Chris Tinsley, Christian Michaels, Christian Pouch, Darth Moss, David Beermore, David K, Dwayne Hackett, Eric Johnson, HH28, Jacob123, Jakey's Gamer, Joint Mango, Jordan Cooper, Kevin Reyes, Cal Barrett, Mad Courier 6, Matt Cutler, Matt Houston, Matt Ross, Mike Burnett, Nathan Elliott, Neil Brennan, Nick Sergi, Robert Cummins, Russell Elwood, Samuel Custer, Grim Santo Sean, Stefan Minton, Tark Latif, Tom Hausen, Vault 13 Hero. Thank you very much for supporting the show. And as always, we'll read patron comments. If you're a patron at the $5 tier, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes, and we'll read them. Matt Ross says, I really wanted to like Terra Nova. It has all the right elements to pique interest of a lost human colony and the mystery of what happened for over 70 years. But the almost Flintstone speech patterns of the Novans with dirt and rock euphemisms was complete shale and mud and ridiculous. So yes, I can see the character Bernadette being a det as a nickname, but Ackery? Come on. When you need a backwards speaking...
I forgot about Ackery.
when you need a backwards speaking native, you can't go wrong with Eric Avari as Nadette's son, whether in Stargate or here. I also don't buy that the Novans didn't think that they were humans, and Archer's guessing is a big stretch. I can see fear of Earthers. So basically you have a society of conservative paranoids that are screaming, get off my land, have space skills, but have never heard of asteroids. Right. T'Pol argues that reintroducing the colonists to a human society would destroy their identity and culture. What culture? They're probably going to be dead soon anyway, even if you moved as per flocks and you can't save everyone. Free land. The Novans suddenly remember that it was the past, and the Novans' sudden remembering of the past and change of heart was so cliché as to not be believable. Despite these major shortcomings, it was ably acted, and some of the points were interesting, but the story not so much. Luckily, we don't have to track that digger meat ever again as the crew quickly warps away.
Yeah, I think that's also an interesting thing too, where that I feel like they end up falling into this hole on Star Trek sometimes where
literally,
yeah, where Starfleet solves the problem of whatever this village is or that's under duress, but they don't actively like make their lives any better.
Yeah,
you know, like there's no in this one. He's probably right, where they're probably within like 10 years of everybody just dying.
The genetic inbreeding must be, the genetic inbreeding is going to hit them at some point, yeah.
Yeah, they're not flourishing as a society. And it's too bad that part of the solution isn't Archer being like, you know, I know this is their home, but they were never given a chance to thrive. So what if is there any way we could like fix up their town or something, you know, something like that, where it's like they give them the pieces to get to thrive as a society instead of just transplanting them into a different set of caves.
Yeah, almost like I don't know if it kind of flies in the face that the Novans are a culture now and you can't really change them. But if the Enterprise almost restarted the colony the way that it was supposed to be, like the Enterprise mission is to sort of reboot this settlement or something like that. I think the Novans are too far gone for that to really happen, but you could make some kind of analogous like effort in that way to sort of help them.
Right.
It's nice because Enterprise being earlier is the one series where you don't run into why don't they just give these poor people replicators?
I know,
thing.
yeah.
So
yeah.
they do have a little bit of an out in that the Enterprise is the most limited of all the series that can actually do something for these people.
Yeah, I was thinking that too about how in TNG it's always like, well, we've saved them for now, but their food supply is going to run out in 50 years. And they're like, yeah, it's too bad. And nobody's like, we got like 6 of these replicators. We only need like 2 of them, really.
They've developed a source of infinite energy. Then they just never give anybody any kind of like dilithium reactor to power their city or whatever.
Well, you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right?
Poindexter G says, an episode that takes advantage of Enterprise's premise. It's something you'd expect the first Warp 5 ship to do. It's decently put together. Eric Avari makes everything he is in instantly better. He's one of my favorite, hey, it's that guy. Next comment is Alex Bogut. Terra Nova, a great premise as to how Earth began colonizing space, but flawed execution as to why did the Novans assume they were being attacked by Earth. Got a feeling of a bad fan version of TOS as Archer tries to be Kirk. His discussion with T'Pol was the most interesting scene. And then, is this the final one? No. Kyle Barrett says, last podcast, Clay was wondering where the bad episodes were. Well, here's one. It's not totally terrible with the Roanoke concept and Archer's frustrations about dealing with humans, let alone aliens, having merit, but too soon the episode becomes stock Star Trek of the dullest order. I would have preferred if the colony was still active and they didn't just want to be in contact, and they just didn't want to be in contact with other humans because they see them as controlling. That would leave Archer in a role similar to the one that the Vulcans hold back on Earth and would make for an interesting drama. But no, we get regressed humans using annoying broken English. And I don't know why they blamed the colony's extinction on a meteor when it was clearly the result of their poor butchery practices. That Digger slaughterhouse looked like a Chinese wet market. What a load of old shale.
Yeah, they're gonna get wiped out by an animal-borne virus pretty soon.
Yeah, keeping your slaughtered meat in a dark, dank cave is, I assume, asking for trouble with it. Neil Brennan says, it's one thing that I don't know if they were trying to do this. There's the scene where Reed is chasing the first Novan he sees, right, through the woods. Mm-hmm. They have the sequence where they kind of like go down this little embankment where they have to hop over tree stumps and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get the impression that they were, I don't know what the point of that scene is other than you just want to show a chase. If you're not going to show that the Novans are much better at moving around on that planet, mm-hmm. Reed kind of follows him exactly the same. Like he acts like a little, what's that? Parkour guy. Like he's just as able to move around the forest as this Novan is. And it felt like a missed opportunity to be like, oh, these people have been here for a while and now they move like sort of natives would around here.
And also, Malcolm, that's his name, right? Malcolm?
Malcolm Reed. Yeah. Malcolm Reed.
He chases this guy through the woods on this planet they've never been to for like 5 minutes. And then once he gets to the cave, Archer and whoever else just like step in from off screen.
Yeah.
They went. I was like, how the hell did they find him so fast? But I guess he's got a tracker on or something, but it was still pretty funny.
They fixed that by the end. They had I thought it was an unusual thing where Archer tells Mayweather to go get some flashlights, and then they cut to him apparently 20 minutes later he's got them the flashlights and they go in. They're not I just thought it was weird to note that they're not carrying flashlights. It was kind of a strange Star Trek thing. You feel like they always have a flashlight when they go down somewhere. Neil Brennan, final comment. Terra Nova, the least horny episode by far so far, and this is devastating.
I don't know about that because those people procreated somehow, and there was how many kids could there have been,
Pretty intriguing setup devolves into workmanlike action finale. A nice hint of Archer being a bit of a fascist, though, with the "it's their birthright" shit. I did like the "it's their birthright" line. I wish they'd gone into that a little bit more, but that's more of our criticism from earlier. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your comments about Terra Nova. Not a particularly great episode. I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. I think it fits neatly into my 2 rating, which is an episode with a lot of problems that are holding things back, but it's not a terrible thing that is fundamentally flawed from the beginning. So I'll give it a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I would agree on this one. It's going to be a 2 for me. It's interesting how this show for me it seems like they're bringing a lot of interesting concepts to the table, but they are ultimately, I think it falls into this feeling of it being very workmanlike, because they bring some interesting concepts to the table, but they ultimately don't add up to anything because nobody really is responding to them in the show. Yeah. It's just sort of like, well, the day's over, let's go have lunch. It's really strange to have, I've said this in every episode so far, but it's still really strange to me to have this setup of, this is the first time Star Trek has done a lot of these Star Trek-y things, and they just do them like they do them in all other Star Trek episodes. They don't take a minute to consider how this affects the characters, or especially with a character like Archer, how this affects him and changes his mind about approach and stuff like that. And not doing that just really lends itself to kind of just going through the paces. Well, go ahead. I was just gonna say, because he's the character ostensibly who is the point of view character. Obviously, it's an ensemble, but it's like it's his show. It's Archer's show. And if he's not changing, and he's not really responding, and he's not registering what's happening, then I don't feel like the audience really does either. And that's what makes it feel so much like they're just going through the motions.
I wonder if when they were producing this, if it's either just old muscle memory of this is how you write a Star Trek episode, or if it's something else where they're losing what they think is a Star Trek aspect to it, like where I wonder if they think that showing Archer and the crew being too being too much of learning what the ropes are, if that feels like it's not a Star Trek episode in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Like if they're too sort of bumbling and learning their way and learning the ropes of everything, does that feel like it's a Star Trek episode? Because what it seems like is that they hint at the setup of all of these episodes, have hinted at the crew is unfamiliar with something and they're going to try to work out how this is going to work. The thing is that their solutions always seem to be Archer sort of randomly stumbling into the right conclusion to something. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I feel like they're not making the mistakes that he would learn from effectively, or they're not portraying Archer as someone who makes a couple mistakes, but then sort of rectifies his mistake with the correct action in the middle, by the end of the episode. So you don't have this learning process that Archer goes through. And I just wonder if the show itself, if they're concerned that the crew can't be shown as incompetent because this is Star Trek. And not to say that that's incompetent, but that's a very different sort of tone from the 24th century Star Trek where everyone knows what to do. They just have to figure out how to get it done.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think... excuse me. I don't think I think you can have those characters like on TNG. It's not like the characters don't come away affected by the storyline that just happened. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. That was a lot of backwards getting around what I'm trying to say, but they do come away being affected by what happens in the story quite often.
Yep.
And that doesn't make them look any more or less smart, because they are these capable people who are having to make decisions that sometimes are outside their, purview. And sometimes they make the wrong decision and sometimes they make the right decision. And either way, it tends to affect them as characters. And they do that on Deep Space Nine all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's so like, if you're not going to do that, if you're not going to have these things matter, then why use this setup of being a prequel where everybody's doing stuff for the first time if none of it is really going to affect your characters?
Right. And I guess if I would argue for the show, I would say that they probably think that they are showing you these initial setups and then showing you how the proper course of action was determined. I think the problem is, like, if you really wanted to embrace the concept of this show, a lot of the episodes have to end in mistakes or tragedy almost, where the lessons that they're learning are, for example, in this episode, causing people to suffer because you think you did the right decision shows me why Starfleet would take something like the Prime Directive so seriously at that point, because like this was clearly a mistake. We can't do this anymore. But I think that what's unsatisfying about it narratively is that if Archer just realizes that without causing that kind of pain, it's not nearly as effective as seeing the reasons as to why they came up with this rule, which is because it is to prevent the suffering that they initially caused when they didn't have the rule.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's 100% more effective. I don't think that the show wants to have downer episodes to that frequency. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you have to have all the episodes be like that, but I think that they want to avoid that sort of like, gee, the Enterprise crew just goes around torturing everybody that they run into. Yeah. Well, you know, what's interesting, and I'm gonna try and keep this in mind going forward, especially into season 2, or at least starting in the back half of season 1, depending on when they finish these episodes. I'm really interested to see how this show gets affected by coming out post 9/11, because these first few episodes were obviously shot before that, and seasons 2 through 4 obviously shot after that. So I assume that there is going to be some of that cultural shift visible through this show, and it's a really interesting show to view that through. Like because oddly enough, like a post 9/11 Star Trek feels more like Star Trek Discovery to an extent, where it's this big battle going on, and it's really violent, and because after 9/11, everybody and everything was torturing everybody. So I'm curious. I'm interested to see how Star Trek changes, if at all, because of that stuff in this show.
Yeah. It the third season is that the show commenting on that kind of stuff.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is that the one everybody likes?
People are very torn about the third season. Some people like it, some people don't. I think the fourth season is the one that people generally like. Yeah.
Sure.
The third season of the show, without having seen a lot of those episodes, is in a single serial arc across all 20-something episodes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're a little ways away from that, but that's pretty much it. Like I guess we can just wrap it up there. It's just that whether or not the show wants to be that kind of like showing how lessons are actually learned, or if these humans are human enough where they kind of talk to each other and they kind of have to think about what they want to do, but whether or not we want to actually show the downside of what they're doing. And I think that the show is struggling to balance those two things.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, guys, thank you very much for listening. Patreon.com/ThePenskeFile if you want to support the show. Otherwise, you can go to all the links down below at ThePenskeFile.com/links. All the social medias are there. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go?
New episode of Rotten Horror Picture Show comes out tomorrow when this is out, right?
Yes.
Monday?
This goes out Monday. Yep, so tomorrow.
Yeah, so it comes out tomorrow. We're covering Ginger Snaps, which is a really fun Canadian werewolf movie from 1999 or 2000. So check that out, and Badass Podcast should be back fairly soon.
Ginger Snaps. I haven't seen Ginger Snaps.
It's fun. It's a werewolf as teenage female puberty kind of thing, and it's really well done.
It's like that. What was that other movie? Teeth. Was that movie?
Yeah, they don't get into exactly what Teeth is about, I don't think, but yeah, it's a pretty interesting movie. It's low budget, but they do a lot with the money that they had.
All right, check it out. You can go to thepenskeFile.com, and the shows are all there, so you can subscribe to Rotten Horror there. You can do all the Star Trek stuff and all that stuff. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're back with the Andorian incident is the next episode, which features Andorians in it, if you can believe it.
Is Jeffrey Combs in this one, or does he show up later?
He is. Jeffrey Combs is the leader of these Andorians. So we meet another Jeffrey Combs. Some people say that his name is Shran, I think. Shran is the best Combs role across all of his work in Star Trek.
Interesting.
So we'll say.
Well, I've been playing Injustice 2, which is, I think, probably my favorite fighting game I've ever played. It's awesome. And he does the voice of Brainiac, which is very cool.
He does a good job, Adam?
Yeah, it's great. They've got like a vocal filter on. So it's not super evident that it was him, but as I was playing it, I was like, man, that sounds a lot like Jeffrey Combs. And it is him. He does a great job, yeah.
Yep, Andorian Incident will be the next episode. Thank you guys very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Patreon.com/The Pensky File if you want to support the show. And otherwise, we will see you next time.